bargain back to efficiency. So imposing the right Pigouvian tax can never make things worse. It can only potentially make things better and maybe be unnecessary, but it can never make things worse, right? So that's not a reason against externality policy. It just is a reason it might not be as important, right? Second thing is that most of the externalities we care about are very diffuse. They don't happen between people who like see each other all the time and who can easily get together. They happen between like me who's driving my car and then people in Africa whose sea levels are rising and might get flooded as a result of me driving my car. Us trying to get together in a room and work out an efficient bargain, given that none of us knows the climate science that translates one of those things into the other, is just a crazy idea, right? Just trying to get together, even physically get together all those people, much less have them talk, much less have them have the information to even figure out what the chain of the externalities is very, very difficult. So, on something like climate change, a consensus of science experts on what the effects there is going to generate a much better estimate of the size of the externality and the efficient tax than is getting together billions of people to all scream at each other, right? So at its best, bargaining is only as good as the information that's available to the people that are participating in the bargain. So whenever we have a market failure, as we talked about in the last class, the real question to ask is not, can the market solve it on its own, but rather, who is the person who best knows about the size of the market failure? The Coase theorem really doesn't say anything against intervention. All it does is reminds us that there will be some times when the people have the relevant information, and regardless of what else we do, come together and fix the problem, right? So the real problem of externalities is how to obtain the right information. And that's going to be the theme of our next class. And the problem is that typically, most externality problems involve, to some extent, information being diffuse throughout a large population. I know how much my farm would be harmed by there being a little bit more acid rain, but the scientist knows how much the car driving causes acid rain, right? And so it's scattered along a lot of different people. On the other hand, a large part of it is something that is best analyzed by experts who can really put all the data together, think through all the consequences, and so forth. So you have to combine expertise with this diffuse public information. And that's really the fundamental problem of designing policies for externalities, is how to do a good job of combining scientific expertise that's really necessary to get any good sense for the connection between these things with diffuse information that comes from people. And many of the trade-offs that come up in these policies have to do with the costs and difficulties of combining those two things. Simplistic answers like the Coase theorem ignore all of these issues, which are really the important issues, right? And hopefully next class will gird you against some of this naivete. Now I guess I actually do have 5 minutes to go through the monopoly thing. What I was going to say here is that sometimes the most effective private solutions to externalities problems actually come through having a monopoly rather than a competitive market. So an example of that, again going back to our network goods case, is that if a firm controls a product, then they can take into account all the externalities that people using that product have on others. So for example, on the fax machine, if the fax machine is supplied by a competitive market, no company is going to want to subsidize people in order to get them all using faxes, because they're not going to reap very many of the profits that come with building up that market. But if someone has a monopoly on the fax, they'll actually have an incentive to build up that market. And so that's one reason why it's actually good for in some of these network areas like Google and Facebook for there to be like one big dominant firm. Because they have a big incentive to build the whole market up, to get people on board so that they can reap the profits that come out of that. So actually non-competitive private solutions with monopolies can actually often be a good way to do this. That can also help with getting things over the hump. So as I was saying, often you need to subsidize a lot early on and raise the price later. That's the reason why a lot of internet companies that sort of are going to end up having a monopoly over their thing are able to raise the money to subsidize early on is because they know that they'll get these monopoly profits down the road. Now, in the long term, that's not going to lower prices, but it can help you get to the more efficient equilibrium and internalize some of these externalities. OK. That's it. See you guys on Thursday.